signed the divorce papers in silence. The room was cold, not from the air conditioning, but from the absence of anything left to warm it. No framed photos, no clutter, no trace of the life we'd built, just a hollow echo in the corners, and the smooth, cruel calm of finality as my pen met the paper. No trembling hand, no questions, just a signature. I think she expected a fight. Her eyes hovered on me, flickering between guilt and confusion, as if she was waiting for something louder, an outburst, a plea, anything to justify the narrative she'd already rehearsed. But there was none, only silence. "Okay," she said, trying to mask the discomfort with artificial lightness. "I'll have my lawyer file it this afternoon." I nodded, didn't look up, didn't need to. That night, I sat alone in the kitchen. The house wasn't mine anymore, not really, but she hadn't moved out yet, and I hadn't asked her to. I poured myself a glass of water, though I wasn't thirsty, and stared out the window into the dark. I remember the soft buzz of the refrigerator, the faint scent of her perfume still lingering near the doorframe, lavender and something sweeter. I used to love that scent. Now it clung to me like a lie. Funny thing is, endings are never clean. We imagine them like slamming doors or shouted arguments, like someone throwing a suitcase down the stairs. But sometimes endings are so quiet you almost miss them happening. A cold dinner, a forgotten birthday, a glance that lingers too long. On a phone screen when you walk into the room. We'd been married 13 years. She was my first everything, first love, first heartbreak, first betrayal. And yet, I didn't hate her. Not even now. I just, saw her clearly for the first time. The silence wasn't submission, it was clarity. I didn't sign those papers because I was giving up. I signed them because I had already let go a long time ago, quietly, on nights when she didn't come home, until late and blamed traffic, or when she laughed harder at another man's joke than she had at mine in months. I noticed. I remembered, but I said nothing. People confuse silence with weakness. They think if you don't scream, you're not hurting. If you don't fight, you don't care. But silence is a weapon too, and sometimes it's the sharpest one. The next morning, everything changed. I was brushing my teeth when my phone started vibrating on the nightstand. One buzz, then two, then 5. By the time I walked over, it was lighting up like a fire alarm. Missed calls, messages, all from people I hadn't spoken to in months. Her sister, a neighbor, even my old boss from when I used to work at the law firm before I opened my own office. Something had broken loose. At first, I thought maybe she'd told someone I'd been abusive, or unfaithful, or unstable. You prepare yourself for those kinds of narratives when you leave quietly. You expect them to fill in the silence with their own versions. But as I scrolled through the messages, my hands started to shake, not from fear, but from the slow, dawning realization of what they were saying. They weren't condemning me. They were apologizing, and one of them, one of them sent a link, video. I tapped it, heart pounding. The screen flickered, then loaded. There she was, not with me, not crying about our failed marriage. No. She was laughing, drunk, in a bar I'd never been to, sitting on the lap of a man I'd never seen. But that wasn't the worst of it. The worst was what she said, slurring into her friend's phone camera with a twisted smile and zero regret. "I can't believe he still doesn't know. 13 years and he never figured it out." And then she said the one thing that would unravel everything. The one sentence that turned my quiet into something deafening. But I'll tell you what she said in a moment, because before that sentence detonated, I already knew this wasn't just betrayal. This was strategy, and I'd been patient long enough. I replayed the video 4 times. Each time, my mind tried to explain it. Maybe it was old. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe I was mishearing. But there's a tone people use when they think they're invincible. When they believe the person they're mocking will never hear it, will never be in the room where the truth escapes. That was her voice. And this was no mistake. "I can't believe he still doesn't know. 13 years and he never figured it out." The words looped in my head. Like a curse, I sat on the edge of the bed, the toothbrush still in my hand, foam drying at the corner of my mouth. I must have looked like a man who'd been struck in the chest and hadn't realized he was bleeding yet, because in that moment, I wasn't angry, not yet. I wasn't even heartbroken. I was unraveling, not because of the infidelity I'd suspected, not because of the divorce I'd accepted it, but because something deeper had been hidden from me. For over a decade, and whatever it was, it made people who barely knew me feel compelled to call and say, I'm sorry, man. You didn't deserve that. I showered, got dressed. No shaking hands, no frantic searching through drawers or photo albums. Just methodical stillness, like I was preparing for war but didn't want to wake the house. She wasn't home. She'd gone out early, Pilates maybe, or breakfast with one of the women who always laughed too loudly around her. She had her routines, her masks. She'd play the calm, abandoned wife, say I left without explanation, say I refused therapy. I knew her performance already. It was always more convincing than mine. But now there was something else under the surface. I could feel it, like a loose thread that once pulled would unravel the entire tapestry of our marriage. So I began to pull. I went into the basement where she rarely went. That's where we stored the old boxes, taxes, letters, childhood photos. She used to call it my memory graveyard. I never corrected her, but in truth, it was more like a vault. A quiet place where the fragments of my life lived without needing explanation, and tucked between a box of college essays and a forgotten suitcase was the old file cabinet we used when we first got married. Back when we still shared everything. The top drawer jammed. I had to shake it loose. And inside, buried beneath property deeds and receipts, I found it, an envelope with my name on it, my handwriting. I had written this to myself. I sat on the cold, concrete floor, the smell of dust and old paper surrounding me, and opened the envelope. Inside were documents, printed emails, a paternity test, a letter I'd written and never sent. I stared at the date. 10 years ago, I had known. Some part of me, deep down, had known, not just suspected, confirmed. The child I had raised as my own, the boy who looked up to me and called me dad, wasn't mine. I'd found out by accident. A blood type mismatch during a routine medical check when he was 3. I'd run the test in secret, convinced it would prove my doubts wrong. It hadn't, but I stayed. I stayed because I loved him, and I thought, maybe, over time, she'd tell me the truth. Maybe she'd find her way back to the honesty we started with. She never did, and I never confronted her. Instead, I buried it so deep I began to forget it myself. Until that video. Until her laugh, until the look in her eyes that said, you were never supposed to find out, but I had. And now I understood why so many people were calling me, why even her own sister had texted me, you didn't deserve any of this, I hope you're okay. The video had leaked, not just to me, it had made its way online, shared by one of her friends, probably meant as a joke, or a moment of drunk gossip. But what she revealed, what she bragged about, wasn't just infidelity. It was manipulation, planned, sustained, smiling in my face while slowly replacing our reality with her fiction. I went upstairs, picked up the photo frame on the nightstand, the one from our wedding. She looked radiant that day. People said we looked perfect together. Now I saw it differently. I saw a woman who could lie with ease, and a man who wanted so badly to believe her that he silenced his own instincts. I wasn't going to confront her with shouting. I wasn't going to tell the world what I'd been through. I didn't need to, because now, the truth was already louder than anything I could say, and she had no idea what was coming next. She came home that afternoon humming. It was the kind of hum people use when they want to be heard without saying anything. A casual soundtrack to her entrance, meant to announce lightness, control. I stayed seated on the couch, watching her through the reflection in the dark television screen. She tossed her keys in the bowl near the door and called out, "Hey, you okay?" My voice was steady. "Fine." She walked into the living room like nothing had happened, hair still damp from a shower at the gym, phone in her hand, eyes skimming through notifications. Probably hadn't seen the messages yet, or maybe she had, and was betting I hadn't. That was always her style. Stay 2 steps ahead and let the other person catch their breath when it's already too late. She smiled at me. A real smile this time, or at least one she thought was convincing. "You want something from that taco place later?" That was her plain normalcy. I stared at her for a second, nodding slowly. Sure. Her expression flickered, just for a second, like she knew something wasn't lining up. I was too calm to still. That's when she checked her phone again, really checked it, and I saw it. That brief contraction in her throat, a tightening in her jaw. Her thumb paused mid-scroll. "Did something happen?" she asked, voice light, but the air was shifting. "You tell me," I said. She laughed dry and defensive. "Why would you say that?" I shrugged. "Strange day. A lot of people reaching out. Even your sister. That got her. I could see it in her spine the way it straightened just a touch too much really," she said, already crafting a lie. "What about I turned the TV on? Mute. Just static movement on the screen. I wasn't ready to show my hand. Not yet. Because now I needed to understand the whole picture. The why, the how, the who else knew. I think they're worried about me," I said, wondering how I'm holding up. She blinked, played dumb. "Because of the divorce." I smiled. "Maybe." She poured herself a glass of wine. Noon wine. That was new. As she sat across from me, I watched her closely. Her fingers were tapping the glass. Fast, nervous. I knew that rhythm. She used to do it when she was lying to her boss about being sick. But this time, I didn't flinch. I didn't accuse, I just listened. That night, after she fell asleep faster than I expected, probably, Medicado opened her laptop. She never changed her passwords. She didn't need to. I'd always trusted her. That trust made it easy. The inbox was mostly clean, but I knew where to look. People like her always hide in the spaces between confidence and arrogance. So I opened the archive folder, found a chain of emails with a name I recognized. Elliot Warren. He used to work with us. Briefly, some marketing guy from Atlanta who came in for a project 5 years ago. He was charming, forgettable. I barely noticed how friendly they'd gotten. He was married, she was polite, but the emails told a different story. I scrolled back farther and farther, and watched the slow transformation from business to flirtation to confession. And then, in one message, 2 years after our son was born, there it was. "I still dream about what might have happened if I hadn't gone back. I look at him sometimes and wonder, do you think he knows?" My heart went still. It was Elliot. He knew. I leaned back in the chair, everything inside me going quiet. It hadn't been just one night, or a single mistake. It had been years. Of choices, of lies, of secret conversations while I worked late and made dinner and read bedtime stories. She had let me build a life around a truth she knew wasn't real. But the strange part, I wasn't crushed. I didn't cry. I didn't rage, because something in me had already grieved this long ago. Now I was just, confirming the cause of death. I copied the emails, all of them, every digital footprint, and then I logged out and sat in the darkness beside our sleeping son's door. I could hear him breathing softly, deeply, a sound that used to fill me with comfort. Now it filled me with something else, purpose. She had built her life on the belief that I would never speak, that my silence was weakness. She was wrong. I wouldn't shout, I wouldn't confront, but I would let the truth speak in my place. And I knew exactly where to begin. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling fan as it rotated with a gentle hum, slow, methodical, hypnotic. She slept upstairs in the bed we used to share. That distance between us had started years ago, but now it had weight. Now it felt real. At 4:17 a.m. I stood up, walked to my office, and turned on the desk lamp. Not overhead lights, just enough to see what I needed. I pulled out the envelope, the paternity test, the emails, my letter to myself. I placed them all neatly on the mahogany surface, and then opened a fresh manila folder, and began. I started with a timeline, not of our marriage but of her lies. Cross-referenced everything from the email threads, the dates she traveled for work, the photos she'd posted, the days Elliot had visited our city. It was like piecing together a crime scene because that's what this had been, really. A quiet theft, not of money, not of property, but of time, identity, and trust. By sunrise, I had built a portfolio, not of revenge but of truth. I didn't want to ruin her. I wanted her to see herself. I wanted the world to see her too, and I wanted to do it without a single accusation leaving my mouth. So I called the one person I never thought I'd call again. Her father. We hadn't spoken in years. After our wedding, he and I drifted apart. He disapproved of my job switch, thought I wasn't ambitious enough, too quiet, too soft-spoken. He preferred people who made noise, but he loved his grandson. And, deep down, he loved the idea of family, his version of it, at least. He was old school, cold but principled, and I knew if he saw the truth, he wouldn't be able to ignore it. I didn't say much on the phone, just told him I needed to meet. "It's about your daughter and my son." He paused, then said, "My office, noon." When I arrived, he was already standing at the window, looking out over the city from the 27th floor. He didn't offer coffee or small talk, just turned and said, "What is this about?" I handed him the folder, sat in silence. He read, first confused, then still. Then something in him cracked, barely noticeable. But it was there, double quotes, this ... this is real. I nodded. He stared at the test results, at the email printouts, at the photo I'd tucked in, the one of Elliot, with his hand on my son's shoulder. "At a birthday party 4 years ago, she let you raise another man's child," he said quietly. I met his eyes. "She let me build a life around a lie." He looked down again. Then, for the first time, I saw regret, not just for what she'd done, but maybe, on some level, for what he hadn't taught her, for the silence he'd passed down. "Want your help?" I said. "I don't want anything from you. I just thought you deserved to know." He nodded, said nothing more. I left him in that glass box, surrounded by his empire. By the time I got home, the video had gone viral. Someone, probably her own friend, had shared it on a public page, and from there, it spread. Facebook, Instagram, Reddit. The comments were merciless. People didn't know it was her, not at first, but the local circles picked it up. A former co-worker recognized her laugh. Another remembered the bar. Then someone found an old post of hers and matched the outfits. And then, just like that, the whole thing was laid bare. Not by me, by her. She came home in tears. Her hands were shaking. Her voice cracked the moment she saw me. "Why didn't you tell me you saw it?" I didn't answer. She dropped her bag, walked toward me, pleading now. "You don't understand. It was stupid. It was just one night." I tilted my head. "One night, ... For 13 years. She froze. I'd never spoken to her like that. Not with venom, but with precision. "I didn't mean for it to happen this way," she whispered. I smiled, faintly. "You meant for it to never be found." Tears streamed down her face now. "Please, ... please don't let our son see this. Don't let him grow up thinking, that's up to you," I said. "You built the story. Now you get to watch it unfold." She collapsed into a chair, completely undone. No one had screamed. No one had slammed doors. But the silence between us was roaring. I walked upstairs, opened my son's door. He looked up from his book. "Hey, Dad." I smiled, sat beside him. "Hey, buddy." And for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't pretending anymore. The days that followed were strangely quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. The kind that comes after an explosion, when the dust is still floating in the air, and you don't know if more is coming. She stopped pretending. No more cheerful greetings. No more small talk. Just silence, tension, avoidance. She began sleeping in the guest room, not because I asked her to, because she couldn't look at me anymore. She had underestimated the damage of exposure. Not just the video she might have survived that. People forget, they move on. But once the emails surfaced, once the paternity test made its way into the hands of the wrong family member, her cousin, I think it was over. The story had cracked wide open. I didn't leak it. I never had to. People talk. People connect dots. And the kind of people she surrounded herself with, image-obsessed, status-driven, they turned fast. Loyalty evaporated like steam. That week, her Pilates class went quiet when she walked in. Her so-called best friend stopped replying to her messages. And her inbox, well, I saw the notifications piling up, unsubscribed, removed, no longer affiliated. Even Elliot hadn't reached out, which said everything. That she came into my office one evening, slowly, as if every step burned her feet. Her eyes were red. She stood there, holding her phone, shaking. Are you telling people?" "No." "Then how you told them?" She looked down. Her lips trembled. "It was a joke. I was drunk. I didn't mean it." "You meant it. You just didn't mean for anyone to hear it." She started crying again. But this time, I didn't feel pity. Not because I wanted to be cruel, because I had run out of space to carry her pain. I was already carrying mine and our son's. That night, she tried to talk to him. I heard her in his room, voice soft, almost rehearsed. She was trying to explain something without explaining anything, trying to preserve some version of herself in his eyes, but he was too young to understand betrayal, and too smart not to notice something was broken. When she came back downstairs, her mascara streaked. I could see it, the walls closing in, the carefully curated life collapsing under its own fiction. "I didn't want to hurt you," she whispered. I looked at her, really looked, and said the one thing I had been holding in for years. You didn't care if you did. She broke her knees, buckled, and she sank to the floor like a puppet with cut strings. I didn't move. I didn't comfort her. I let the silence do what it needed to do, because finally, she was sitting in it. The reality, the shame, the truth, and I had no more room for her excuses. The next day, she left early, said she needed to stay with her mother for a while. I nodded. After she was gone, I checked her laptop one last time. Not to spy, not to snoop, to be sure. I found a hidden folder, buried deep in a system folder, disguised with a boring name. It wasn't encrypted, just tucked away, as if hiding in plain sight. Inside were voice recordings. I didn't want to listen, but I did. Her voice, his voice, conversations they'd had over the years, planning, laughing, whispering, and then, one clip dated a little over 6 years ago. She was talking to someone I didn't recognize. A woman. I have to keep this going. If I tell him now, he'll leave, and I can't lose the house. Not yet. He's too quiet. He'll just disappear and take everything with him. You don't understand. He doesn't scream. He erases. I sat back in my chair, stunned. She had known, not just about the lie, but about me. She knew I wasn't the man to make a scene. I was the man who waited, and when I finally walked away, I would leave no room for redemption. That's when it clicked. All of it. This wasn't just a marriage that crumbled. This was a campaign, a long, quiet campaign to keep up the image, the lifestyle, the illusion, at my expense. And now, that illusion was gone. She thought my silence would protect her, but my silence was never for her. It was the space I needed, to let the truth breathe, and the truth was doing its job, loudly. She returned 4 days later, not with luggage, not with apologies, but with a lawyer. I opened the door, and there they were standing side by side, like they'd rehearsed their posture in the mirror. He was the type of man who wore cologne as armor, smiled too wide, and called you sir as if it meant something. She didn't make eye contact. He introduced himself, said they wanted to finalize a few things. Tone polite, measured, pretending it was all still civilized. I nodded, stepped aside, let them in. He sat. She stood. I think it's best if we make this clean, she said softly, eyes flicking around the living room as if it no longer belonged to her. No hostility, no drawn-out drama. I smiled. There was no drama. Not on my part. Just consequences. She wanted to negotiate. Property, custody, visitation. She came armed with assumptions. That my silence meant surrender. That I hadn't prepared, but I had. I reached into the drawer and handed her my own folder. No accusations. No threats. Just facts. The lawyer skimmed the contents. His brow furrowed. Her posture shifted. I sat across from them and said, calmly, I'm not taking him away from you, but I'm protecting him from your lies. She opened her mouth, closed it, looked at her lawyer, panicked. I continued, you'll sign a joint custody agreement. I'll have primary residence. You'll attend therapy, parenting classes. More hidden communication with Elliot, and the moment you try to spin this publicly, those emails go to the school board, the PTA, your clients, your church. The lawyer spoke up, careful, clipped. Mr. Palmer, this feels more like blackmail than negotiation. I looked him in the eye. No, this is what honesty looks like. When you've ignored it for 13 years, she began crying. Not the theatrical sobbing she used to practice in front of mirrors, but the kind that comes from something breaking loose inside. Her hands trembled. Her body sagged into the chair. Her mask slid off completely. I didn't mean to lose everything, she whispered. I nodded. You didn't lose everything. You traded it for control. And now the costs come due. She didn't argue. She didn't even deny it, because there was nothing left to protect. The silence between us wasn't hostile anymore. It was final. The lawyer folded the folder shut. We'll be in touch. I nodded again. She lingered on the porch. Her eyes met mine, just once, before she got into the car. And in that look, I saw it all. The realization that the quiet man she underestimated had dismantled her world with nothing more than patience. I watched them drive away. No rage, no satisfaction, just stillness. That night, I took my son to the park. He laughed when I pushed him on the swing. Pure joy, untainted, unaware. I watched the sunset melt across the sky behind him and felt, for the first time in a long while, peace. Not victory. Just peace. It didn't matter what people said anymore. The truth had done its work. The lie had collapsed under its own weight, and I had found myself again, not in noise, not in revenge, but in the quiet power of endurance, in silence. And that silence had finally spoken loud, enough for everyone to hear. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for your time. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel. It really helps. Click the video on the screen and I'll see you there.